Hello again and welcome back to our course on Visio 2013. In this section we're actually going to create a drawing from scratch, and then after we've done that I'm going to set exercise 1, which is for you to create a drawing from scratch. Now the drawing we're going to create is going to be an office layout drawing, very straightforward one to begin with, and in the process of doing that I'm going to explain quite a few more things about the Visio workspace, and I'm also going to talk in more detail about the shapes window. Another thing that we're going to start to concentrate on in this section is some of the Visio terminology, because the terminology is very important when we come to using what can be quite complex templates to draw quite complex drawings. So to get started, I click on File to take me into Backstage View. New is already selected, and what I want is an office layout diagram. Now don't forget, if you can't find the one that you want, maybe there's a lot on there, if you click on Categories, if you go to Maps and Floor Plans, you can see you've got a home plan there, which is underneath the cursor at the moment. I'm going to go for this office layout. Metric units or US units, I'm going to go with US units. And basically an empty drawing is created. Now one thing I'd like to mention here, which I haven't mentioned before, is that if you look below the drawing window, there is a little tab here that says Page 1. And by default most of the drawings that you do will probably be one-page drawings, at least to begin with. Now as your drawings get more sophisticated you may need to add additional pages. There can be all sorts of reasons for additional pages, such as the fact that maybe you're doing different views of a building, or maybe you're doing different aspects of the design of a system. Now if you need more pages, you can click on the plus button here to create an additional page. So if I click on plus, I've now got 2 pages and each can have its own Visio drawing on it. It works in pretty much the same way as the worksheets do if you're familiar with using Microsoft Excel. Now on this occasion we only need 1 page, so I'm going to right click on page 2 and click on delete. So we're creating a single page office floor plan drawing. Now the first thing I'm going to do now is to give it a name, so I'm going to do a save as, so that's back to Backstage View, save as, there's course file 1, this is going to be course file 2. Okay, I can start drawing. Now as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the drawing window here, and to the left of the drawing window we have the shapes window that I've also mentioned before. Given the selected template, you will see by default in the shapes window a number of what are called stencils, and a stencil is actually a collection of masters. Now I'm going to start by selecting one of the stencils. I'm going to select Office Accessories, and on the Office Accessories stencil there are about a dozen masters. These include things like small plant, large plant, desk lamp, marker board and so on. Now if I wanted to put one of these masters onto my diagram, as you've seen already, I can just drag it on if I want to. I've now got a shape on the diagram. The terminology we generally use is that on the stencil we have the masters, and when we use a master to draw a shape in a diagram, when it's on the diagram it becomes a shape. So it was a master when it was there, it's a shape here. Of course I can resize the shape to the specific requirements. So we have shapes that are instances of masters, and we have stencils that are collections of masters. And that's very important terminology when you're working with Visio. Now if I were drawing my particular office layout, I probably wouldn't start with a waste bin. a waste can. I'm actually going to start with the whole office itself. So I'm going to undo all of the operations involved in putting that waste can in my diagram, and I'm going to go back to walls, doors and windows, because I may want to start by drawing the whole room. Of course, I may just put the equipment on without bothering to put the walls on there. So for instance, if I were dealing with an L-shaped room rather than a rectangular room, I might at this point say the first master I need to use is a master for the room itself. So let me drag that onto my drawing. I'm actually going to have an L-shaped office. Now don't worry too much at the moment about the sizing information, 4 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet and so on. We're going to deal with that kind of thing later on. At the moment we're going to do all of this very visually. So what I'm going to do first now is to use the sizing handles to get the size and orientation of my office about right. I'm going to say that's my L-shaped office. That's about right. So let's now put a couple of windows in the office, and this is where you start to see just how clever Visio is. I'm going to drag a window onto that wall. Once I've dragged it roughly into position, Visio sorts out the orientation. It knows which way round a window goes in relation to a wall, and it's given it a width of 2 feet 6 inches. Obviously I may need to adjust that, but more on that later. Let's put a second window in. That one's there. And of course we'll need at least one door. I'm going to have a couple of doors because I needed a sort of escape door as well, a fire escape type door. So I'm going to put one in there. Note it opens into the room. And I'm going to put another one say there. That also opens into the room. So I've got 2 windows and 2 doors now. Now before we go any farther, I wonder if you've noticed occasionally a little message flashing up in the middle of the screen. It flashes up so quickly that you may not even have noticed it. If you did notice it, you may wonder what it said. You may think something was going wrong, which is not the case at all. But once you start working with Visio, you're in the realms of potentially losing work if you don't save it on a regular basis. Now, of course, it's a very good principle to save your work on a regular basis, but Visio has an autosave facility, and as soon as you start work, which is going to be about now, I suggest you make sure that the autosave facility is switched on. Now, if you go into Backstage View, it's in the options and it's on the Save page, 3rd page down, Save. Save files in this format Visio document. Immediately underneath that, save auto recover information every, by default, 10 minutes. Make sure you have autosave on. If you don't want autosave on and you're going to switch it off, then make sure you save your work regularly or disaster may ensue. If Visio itself fails, or your power supply fails, your laptop fails, whatever it might be, potentially you can lose a lot of work. Now you may say, well, why would anybody switch autosave off? Why would anybody use a piece of software like Visio with autosave switched off? The answer to that is that if you have a PC, a device you're using, which is not very highly powered, so it's really struggling a bit to run Visio, or you're dealing with such a complex diagram, possibly a diagram with links to databases and so on, the sort of thing we're going to look at later on in the course, an autosave may make a noticeable delay when you're working. You may actually see everything pause. It can appear even to hang up while you're working, and it really can be quite irritating if that starts to happen. Now, if you've got an adequately powered device, then that shouldn't happen at all. But we're not all able to buy the biggest computers that we possibly can in order to avoid performance issues. So if you do find that autosave causes you performance issues and you have to switch it off, maybe just switch it off for dealing with a particularly big drawing. Of course, make sure you switch it back on again afterwards. Don't forget to save very frequently to avoid losing work. Now mine's set on, make sure yours is set on as well, and we'll carry on. I can just cancel Visio options. Now, one particularly important thing to realize about Visio is that it is very dynamic. I set up this L-shaped office. I thought I was drawing the office correctly. I put the doors and windows in, and now I think that can't possibly be right. That door wouldn't go more than halfway across the width of the office. I do a bit of a measure up and I realise that I've actually got the dimensions of my L-shaped office a little bit wrong. So if I select the office itself, note the sizing handles halfway along each wall, on each corner, but also these internal walls here, the ones within the L, also have little handles, and I can use those to perhaps correct any errors I may have made originally in my sizing. Now, it's important to recognize that you can constantly adjust a Visio diagram in this sort of way. So now I'm a lot happier with the layout now. I've got my doors and windows in place. I'm going to start putting some office furniture in. So I've chosen the office furniture stencil, and the first thing I'm going to do is to put a table in. So I'm going to grab this table and I'm going to drop it there. Now the table is not actually that big. I can resize it using the sizing handles. I can also resize it by specifying the size, something we're going to look at later on. But that's a bit closer to the correct size. And if I decide that the table is going just here, but that I need it the other way around, I can use that rotation control to rotate the shape. Maybe a final tweak on its position. And I've now got my table in the corner of the office, if you like, and there's room for people to walk past. It might be a bit of a hazard there, people catching themselves on the corner of the table, but never mind. So in this way I can start to build up the layout of my office. So I've put in a filing cabinet and a desk and chair, and I'm looking at that table again and thinking, I'm not so sure about that. That really is going to be a little bit awkward. So I've selected the table, and I'm going to use a command that we talked about earlier on in the course. On the Home tab towards the right there is a Change Shape command, and if I click on Change Shape I can see a visual list of the shapes on the currently selected stencil, and I'm going to change it for a multi-chair round table. I'm going to need to resize that. It's a little bit on the big side, so let's make it a little bit cozier group. Maybe it should be a little bit smaller than that, but if I put that in the corner, that's going to be a whole lot more practical. So there we are. I've now put in some more furniture and a little plant, and there is my office layout. It's not very good at the moment, but it's a good place to start with. And I just want to explain one more piece of terminology, a very important piece of terminology. What is a template? Well, a template is one or more drawing pages. Quite a few templates have several drawing pages. It will normally have the measurement units defined for that template, and it may include any number of stencils. There are templates that don't have any stencils. Generally speaking, templates have stencils, and they can have many. It may include background pages, and some of the pages in a template may already have shapes in them. A template can also have bespoke software associated with it. Now, on this course, writing our own software, coding, is really outside the scope of the course, but I am going to give you a brief introduction to it towards the end of the course. I'm going to talk about macros and VBA a little later on. So a template is some or all of those things, and templates can be extremely complex. You can in fact make your own templates. You can make your own stencils for that matter. So that's it on drawing our first shape here. This is the file 02, course file 02, if you want to take a look at it yourself, and I will be doing some more work on this later on. But in the next section I'm going to set you your first piece of work to do yourself, so please join me for that.